Jacob was a farmer who lived alone on a quiet planet far from the busy cities. The land was wide, the sky endless, but his farm felt empty and heavy with silence. For years he had worked the soil with his own two hands, growing crops that barely kept him alive. The machines were old, the fences broken, and the animals thin. He needed help, yet no one wanted to live so far from the comfort of towns. Each day he grew more tired, his back aching, his hope fading. One evening, after another long day of work, Jacob sat at his small wooden table and stared at a broken pen. He sighed and turned on his old computer screen, its blue glow filling the dark room. With slow fingers, he typed a short message. Help wanted. Farm workers needed. Food and shelter provided. Hard work required. Contact Jacob, Green Valley Farm. He posted the ad across the local trade network, a place where workers, travelers, and wanderers could see it. Jacob leaned back in his chair, wondering if anyone would even care. For him, it was a small hope, a chance that maybe tomorrow someone would come. But the days passed, and no one came. The farm grew quieter, the winds colder, and Jacob's heart heavier. He told himself not to expect much, yet every night he looked down the road waiting. The road stayed empty, only dust moving across it. One night, as Jacob was fixing the barn roof under the pale light of the moon, something strange happened. The sky flickered with a soft glow, like falling stars breaking across the night. At first he thought it was a storm of meteors, but the lights slowed, drifting down like silent fire. Jacob froze, his hammer still in his hand, as 5 shapes landed at the edge of his farm. The glow faded, and there stood 5 figures wrapped in dark cloaks, their movements slow. They looked tired, weak, and lost. Jacob's heart pounded. Were they raiders or wanderers or something worse? He climbed down from the barn, dirt crunching under his boots, and held his lantern high. The figures stepped forward, and as the light touched their faces, Jacob gasped. They were not human. Their eyes were large, glowing faintly in the night. Their skin marked with patterns that seemed to shimmer. They were alien women, and the weight of sorrow clung to them like shadows. One of them, taller than the rest, pulled back her hood and spoke in a soft voice. "Farmer, please do not fear us. We saw your ad. We came because we have nowhere else to go." Jacob stood still, his breath caught. He had asked for workers, but these were not simple workers. He could see the pain in their faces, the way they leaned on each other to stand. Their clothes were worn, their hands trembling from hunger. Another stepped forward, her voice broken with sadness. "Our husbands are gone. The war took them. Our homes are ash. We are widows with no shelter, no food, no future. We beg you, give us a place to stay." Jacob's lantern shook in his hand. 5 alien widows, alone and desperate, standing on his land because of a simple job ad. The farm, which had felt empty for so long, was now filled with a strange tension. His mind spun. Should he help them, or send them away before trouble followed? The tallest widow's eyes locked on his, glowing faintly in the lantern's light. "If you turn us away," she whispered, "we will not survive the night." Jacob swallowed hard. He had wanted workers, but what he got was something far different. Far heavier. His lonely life had changed in an instant. Yet deep inside, a question burned like fire in his chest. Jacob's farm had never felt so strange. The night was quiet, yet his heart pounded like a hammer in his chest. 5 alien widows stood before him, their glowing eyes reflecting the lantern's weak light. They looked fragile, yet there was something in their posture that carried silent strength. Jacob's hands trembled as he lowered the lantern, unsure what to do. The tallest widow, the one who had spoken first, stepped forward. Her voice was low, filled with exhaustion. "You asked for workers, farmer. We saw your message, but we do not come only for work. We come because we have no other choice." Jacob frowned. "I don't understand," he muttered. "I put out a call for farmhands, not—" His words trailed off as he studied their faces. The women lowered their hoods, and for the first time he saw them clearly. Their alien features carried a strange beauty. Sharp cheekbones, silver patterns running across their skin like rivers, of light and eyes that seemed older than their years, but their beauty was dimmed by hunger, loss, and fear. Another widow spoke, her voice cracked like dry earth. Our husbands are dead. The war burned our homes, our children. Gone we wandered, hunted, unwanted. Your farm ad was the only message of shelter we saw, please. Do not turn us away. Jacob's chest tightened. He had expected strong men with shovels, not widows with broken hearts. He had asked for help, but these women needed something far greater. Widows, he whispered, tasting the word like it was heavy on his tongue. The women nodded, their faces shadowed by grief. The youngest of them, barely more than a girl, clutched the sleeve of the tall widow and whispered, "He does not want us, let us leave before the hunters come." Jacob froze. Hunters? The word sent a chill crawling down his spine. The tall widow raised her hand to calm the young one, then turned back to Jacob. "We will work," she said firmly, her voice gaining strength. "We will plow your fields, tend your animals, fix your broken tools. We ask only for shelter, food, and a place to breathe without fear." Jacob looked around his farm. The broken fences, the tired soil, the half-empty grain bins. He was barely surviving himself. Could he really feed 5 more mouths? Could he risk taking them in when trouble might follow? As if reading his thoughts, the widow's eyes narrowed. "If you refuse us, we will not see the sunrise, and when our enemies come, they will not care that you turned us away. They will burn your farm to the ground." Jacob's blood ran cold. Enemies, hunters. He stared at the women, torn between compassion and fear. They were strangers, yet their desperation was real. "Why me?" he asked quietly. "Of all the places, of all the people, why did you come here?" The tallest widow's voice broke for the first time. "Because you were the only one who still offered shelter. Everyone else offers weapons or silence. You offered a home, even if only for workers." Her words cut deep into Jacob's heart. For years his farm had been a prison of loneliness. Now 5 lives stood before him, hanging by a thread, asking him to be more than a farmer. He rubbed his face, struggling to think. If he took them in, danger would surely follow. If he turned them away, he would be sending them to death. Either choice weighed on him like stone. One widow stepped forward, her voice a whisper. "You are human, and humans are known for kindness. Do not prove us wrong, farmer." Jacob's breath caught. Kindness. It had been so long since anyone had spoken that word to him. At last he sighed. "You can stay for the night. Only the night. The barn is empty. It will keep the wind off you." Relief washed over their faces, but Jacob felt no comfort. He knew this choice had tied his life to theirs. As he led them toward the barn, he noticed something strange. Symbols glowed faintly on their arms, shifting like living fire under their skin. He wanted to ask, but fear held his tongue. Later that night, Jacob lay awake in his small bed, staring at the ceiling. Outside, he could hear the quiet breaths of the widows in the barn. But he also heard something else. Soft voices whispering in an alien tongue. The words carried sorrow, but also urgency, as if they were planning something they did not want him to hear. Jacob turned to the wall, shutting his eyes. He had wanted workers. Instead, he had taken in widows with secrets. Widows who spoke of hunters. The farm was no longer a lonely place. It was a place of mystery, danger, and choices that could not be undone. And as the night deepened, Jacob could not shake the feeling that the widows were not just running from something. They were carrying something with them. Something that might change his farm forever. The morning sun rose over Green Valley Farm, spilling golden light across the fields. Jacob had barely slept, his mind turning in circles. He had given the widows 1 night of shelter, but with daylight came the question he could no longer push. Away. Should he let them stay or send them away before trouble followed? When Jacob stepped outside, he found the 5 alien widows already awake. They stood near the barn, speaking in low voices he could not understand. Their cloaks were pulled tight, but their glowing skin still shimmered faintly in the sunlight. They looked out of place like shadows standing in the middle of his ordinary farm. The tall widow turned when she saw him. Her silver eyes locked on his, calm but heavy with something unspoken. "We thank you for the barn," she said softly. "It kept the wind away, but we must ask again. Let us stay longer, we will work for every piece of bread." Jacob shifted uneasily. He looked at his broken fences, his half-dead crops, the pile of work he could never finish. Alone, part of him wanted to accept, but another part whispered danger. "You talk of hunters," Jacob said slowly. "Who are they? Why would they come here?" The widows exchanged uneasy looks. The youngest one lowered her head, trembling. The tall widow finally answered, "They are soldiers from the empire that killed our husbands. They chase us because we carry what they fear. If they find us, they will not only destroy us, they will destroy you too." Jacob's stomach turned. He had expected simple workers, not fugitives carrying some unknown burden. He stared at them, his fists clenching at his sides. "I cannot fight soldiers," he muttered. "I am just a farmer." The second widow stepped closer, her voice sharper than before. "You do not have to fight them. Just give us a corner of your land, that is all we ask." Her words sounded simple, but Jacob felt the weight of them. A corner of his land could turn into a battlefield. His farm, his quiet life, all of it could be burned to ash if soldiers came searching. He opened his mouth to refuse, but then he noticed something. In the dirt near their feet, strange symbols glowed faintly. It was as if the earth itself responded to their presence. Jacob blinked, and the glow faded. Were his eyes playing tricks? Or was there more to these widows than grief and hunger? Later that day, Jacob tried to push the thoughts away by working in the fields. But no matter how he swung the hoe or fixed the fence, his eyes kept drifting toward the barn. The widows moved silently, repairing the old water pump with hands that seemed to know more than human tools. One of them coaxed his tired ox back to its feet with only a touch. Another cleared weeds twice as fast as Jacob ever could. It was as if their sorrow turned into quiet strength when they worked. Jacob found himself caught between gratitude and fear. They were helping him in ways no human workers ever had, but why? What did they really want from him? That night, Jacob sat at his table, the lantern flickering weakly beside him. He thought of his empty years, the silence of the farm, the weight of loneliness. Now, in only one day, the farm felt alive again. Yet the life it carried was dangerous. He rubbed his temples and whispered to himself, "Shelter or trap? Which one is it?" As if in answer, a knock came at his door. Jacob froze. When he opened it, the tall widow stood there, her face pale in the lantern light. "Farmer," she said softly, "we must speak." She stepped inside without waiting. Her eyes scanning the small room, Jacob swallowed hard, his throat dry. "What is it?" She looked at him, her silver eyes glowing faintly. "You wonder if we are a trap. I see it in your face, but know this. Our enemies are close. They are already searching the valley. If you send us away now, we will not last a night. And when they come to question you, they will not spare you either." Jacob's breath caught. His quiet farm was no longer hidden. It was already part of something larger. The widow lowered her voice. "Let us stay, farmer. Let us work. We will protect what we can. But if you betray us, all will be lost." Her words cut like a blade. Jacob looked into her eyes and saw not only sorrow but also fire. These widows were not as helpless as they seemed. They carried secrets, power, and danger. When she left, Jacob sat in silence, his heart pounding. He realized the truth. He was no longer deciding whether to give them shelter. He was deciding whether to tie his fate to theirs. And deep in the night, when strange lights flickered again on the far horizon, Jacob knew one thing. The hunters she spoke of were real, and they were coming. The days that followed were unlike anything Jacob had known. For years his farm had been slow, heavy work, each task dragging on his tired body. But now, with the alien widows helping, the land seemed to wake from its long sleep. They worked, in silence most of the time, yet their hands moved with skill. One widow repaired the broken water pump using thin wires and strange tools Jacob had never seen before. Another guided the oxen with a soft hum, and the tired animals obeyed as if bewitched. The youngest widow tended the crops, touching the soil with glowing fingers. By evening, the wilted plants stood taller, their leaves greener. Jacob stared at them in disbelief. What his hands had failed to do in years they had done in hours, but with every wonder came a shadow. Their voices in the alien tongue drifted across the farm at night. Whispers Jacob could not understand, soft yet urgent. When he tried to listen, the words stopped, and their eyes watched him carefully. It was as if the widows carried secrets they refused to share. One evening, after a long day of work, Jacob sat by the barn door. The widows were inside, their soft voices rising and falling like a strange song. He leaned closer, straining to hear. The tall widow's voice carried through the wooden boards. "They will find us. The mark is glowing stronger. We must decide soon." Jacob's stomach tightened. What mark? What decision? He wanted to burst in and demand the truth, but something held him back. Fear and curiosity. The next morning, Jacob tried to act as if nothing had changed. He handed them tools, showed them where the fences needed fixing, but his eyes kept drifting to their arms. When the sleeves of their cloaks slipped, he saw the shimmering patterns again, symbols glowing faintly beneath their skin. They pulsed like living light, fading when he stared too long. He did not ask, but the question burned inside him. What are they hiding? Despite the secrets, the farm began to flourish. The widow's presence turned silence into movement, loneliness into life. Jacob almost felt grateful, yet the unease never left him. Sometimes, he caught the youngest widow staring at the horizon, her eyes wide with fear. Other times, the second widow sharpened broken metal into blades, hiding them under the hay. They spoke of being workers, but Jacob knew these were not ordinary widows. That night, as the moons climbed high, Jacob could not sleep. He stepped outside, the cool wind brushing against his face. The barn glowed faintly, as if light escaped through the cracks. His heart pounded. He walked closer, careful not to make a sound. Peering through a gap in the wood, Jacob froze. Inside, the widows sat in a circle, their hands joined. The glowing symbols on their arms blazing brighter than ever. The air shimmered around them like heat rising from fire. They whispered in unison, their voices carrying both grief and power. It was not a prayer. Jacob knew it was something else. Something dangerous. Suddenly, one widow's head snapped toward the door, her glowing eyes meeting his through the gap. Jacob stumbled back, his heart racing. The barn door opened slowly and the tall widow stepped out, her silver eyes calm but sharp. "You should not have watched," she said softly. Jacob swallowed, his mouth dry. "What are you doing in there? What are those marks? What are you hiding from me?" The widow's face was unreadable. "We do what we must to survive," she said, her voice low. "Do not ask questions you are not ready to hear the answers to, farmer. Some truths carry weight you cannot bear." Jacob clenched his fists, anger mixing with fear. "This is my farm, I have a right to know." Her gaze softened, but only slightly. "You gave us shelter that ties your fate to ours, but if you truly wish to know, then be prepared, for once you hear, you cannot turn back." She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. "Our marks are not only symbols of grief, they are keys, and the hunters seek them if they find us here. Your farm will not survive the fire they bring." Jacob's blood ran cold. He wanted to demand more, but she stepped back into the barn, closing the door with finality. He stood in the night, staring at the wooden boards. The farm that had once been a place of silence now carried secrets heavy enough to crush him. As the wind howled through the valley, Jacob looked at the horizon and saw faint lights flicker in the distance. Not the soft lights of stars, but something sharper, colder, moving across the night sky. The hunters were closer than ever, and Jacob knew his decision to shelter the widows was no longer a simple act of kindness. It was a choice that might cost him everything. The valley was quiet that morning, but Jacob felt a heaviness in the air. The sun rose, yet the farm seemed darker, as if shadows stretched longer than they should. For days, the widows had worked beside him, mending fences, pulling weeds, fixing the broken tools. Yet every whisper he heard at night, every glow on their arms, reminded him that trouble was moving closer, that trouble finally came. It started with a low hum that shook the ground. Jacob dropped his hoe and looked up at the sky. Far beyond the hills, sharp streaks of light cut across the morning blue. Not birds, not clouds. Ships. He had seen ships before. Small traders crossing the skies, but these were different. They flew in tight formation, dark shapes like blades slicing through the horizon. The widows froze when they saw them. The youngest let out a small cry and clutched the tall widow's arm. "They have found us," she whispered, her voice breaking. Jacob's chest tightened. Hunters. The word that had haunted his nights was now real, moving straight toward his farm. The tall widow turned to him, her silver eyes burning. "Farmer, listen to me," she said, her voice sharp and urgent. "They are searching for us. They will stop at nothing. If they see us here, they will kill you too. You must decide. Stand with us, or cast us out now." Jacob's mind spun. He had lived his life with simple choices: when to plant, when to harvest, when to repair a fence. Now, a choice greater than all of them stood before him. Protect these widows, or save himself by handing them over. Before he could answer, the ships roared lower, circling above the valley. Dust rose. From the fields, animals cried out in fear, the oxen pulling at their ropes. Jacob's farm felt small, fragile, like a candle in a storm. The widows moved quickly, their cloaks whipping in the wind. The second widow pulled out the sharpened metal blades she had hidden in the hay. Another gathered strange pieces of broken tech from their packs, snapping them together with quick hands. Jacob stared in shock. These were not helpless widows. They were preparing for a fight. "What are you doing?" Jacob shouted. "They'll destroy us if we resist." The tall widow turned, her eyes fierce. "If we do not resist, we are already dead." The ground shook as one of the ships landed at the edge of the valley. Tall figures stepped out, armored in black steel, their movements sharp and merciless. They carried weapons glowing with cold light. Hunters. Jacob's mouth went dry. He had hoped the widows were exaggerating. But now he saw the truth. These soldiers were killers, and they were searching for prey. The widows pressed closer to him, their glowing marks pulsing brighter. The tall widow spoke quickly, her voice urgent. "They will question you, farmer. They will ask if you have seen us. If you betray us, we are lost. If you protect us, you will share our fate. Which path will you choose?" Jacob's throat tightened. He looked at his farm, the crops finally standing tall, the fences fixed, the soil alive again. He looked at the widows, 5 broken souls who had given him more life in days than he had felt in years. And then he looked at the hunters, merciless shadows moving closer, weapons ready. Fear screamed inside him to send the widows away, but something deeper, heavier, stronger rose in his chest. He clenched his fists, his jaw set. "I won't betray you," Jacob said, his voice shaking but firm. "If they want you, they'll have to go through me first." The widow's eyes widened, their glowing symbols flaring brighter. For the first time, Jacob saw hope flicker in their sorrow. The hunters reached the edge of the farm, their leader raising a hand. His voice was sharp, echoing across the field. "Human farmer, you will answer. Have you seen 5 fugitives? Alien widows, marked with fire?" Jacob felt his knees weaken, his heart hammering. The widows stood hidden in the barn behind him, their breaths silent. The hunters' glowing weapons hummed, waiting for his reply. Jacob swallowed hard, his voice steady. "No, I've seen no one." The leader's eyes narrowed. He stepped closer. Scanning the farm behind him, more hunters spread out, searching the fields, kicking at fences, looking under wagons. One drew near the barn, his hand reaching for the door. Jacob's chest tightened. If they opened the barn, it would all be over. The widows would be found and the farm would burn. The tall widow's whisper echoed in his mind. "Stand with us, farmer." And in that moment, Jacob realized the truth. He was no longer just a farmer. He was standing on the line between survival and destruction, and the choice he had made would change his life forever. The hunter's hand touched the barn door, the glow of his weapon lighting the wood. Jacob's fists clenched, his breath held. The night was gone, the silence broken. The storm had arrived. The hunter's hand rested on the barn door. Jacob's heart pounded so loud he feared the soldiers could hear it. Inside the barn, the widows waited in silence, their glowing marks hidden beneath cloaks. If the door opened, everything would be lost. "Wait," Jacob said, stepping forward. The soldiers turned, weapons humming. The leader narrowed his eyes. "What is it, human?" Jacob forced himself to stand tall, though his knees shook. "You have no right to search my farm without cause," he said. "This land is mine. No fugitives here, only crops and tired animals." The leader's cold eyes studied him. Then, he smirked, a cruel smile. "You protect no one but yourself, farmer. Do not lie to me." Jacob swallowed hard. His fists clenched. Fear burned in his chest, but so did something else, anger. This was his farm, his land, his life. No soldier had the right to take it. Behind the barn door, the widows heard his words. Their eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. The youngest whispered, "He defies them. He risks everything for us." The tall widow placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Then we must not let him stand alone," she whispered back. The hunter leader raised his weapon, its glow burning brighter. "One last time, human," he growled. "Tell me where they are, or your blood will stain this soil." Jacob's voice broke through the fear. "You want my land? You'll have to burn it first. But I will not betray those who seek shelter here," the soldiers hissed, anger flashing in their eyes. The leader gave a sharp signal, and 2 hunters moved toward the barn. Jacob's chest tightened. This was the moment. Suddenly, the barn doors burst open. The 5 widows stepped out, their cloaks falling back. The glowing marks on their arms blazed with light, filling the yard with silver fire. The hunters froze, startled by the sudden brightness. The tall widow's voice rang out, firm and fearless. "You came for us, here we are, but you will not take the farmer. He stands under our protection." The soldiers sneered, their weapons raised, but the air itself seemed to shift. The widow's glowing symbols pulsed in rhythm. Humming with hidden power, the second widow spun the sharp metal blades she had forged. Her eyes locked on the nearest hunter. Another held a strange device, cobbled together from broken tech, glowing with unstable energy. Jacob stared, stunned. They were no longer helpless, they were warriors, broken yet unyielding. The leader roared, "Seize them!" The hunters charged, weapons blazing. Jacob ducked as a beam of light scorched the fence beside him. The widows moved like shadows, faster than he could follow. One widow slashed at a soldier's weapon, sparks flying. Another fired the glowing device, sending a blast of energy that threw 2 hunters backward. The farm erupted into chaos. Animals screamed, fences shattered, fire lit the dry grass. Jacob grabbed the nearest tool, a heavy iron shovel, and swung it with desperate strength. The blade struck a soldier's arm, knocking his weapon into the dirt. The soldier snarled and lunged at him, but Jacob shoved the shovel's handle into his chest, sending him stumbling back. For the first time in his life, Jacob was not only a farmer, he was a fighter. The battle raged on. The widows fought with fury born of loss, their glowing marks burning like fire in the night. Each strike they made carried both sorrow and defiance. They were not just widows, they were survivors of war, carrying the last strength of their fallen husbands. But the hunters were many and they were merciless. More ships descended, their shadows darkening the valley. Jacob's hope faltered, his arms shaking with exhaustion. "We cannot win this," he gasped. The tall widow's eyes blazed with silver. "Height." "We do not need to win," she said. "We only need to survive the night." She pressed her glowing hand against the earth. The soil trembled, the crops bending as if bowing to unseen power. Strange symbols spread across the ground, forming a circle of light around the farm. The hunters hesitated, their faces flashing. With unease, Jacob staggered back, his eyes wide. What is this?" The widow's voice was steady, filled with sorrow and strength. "It is the last gift of our husbands, a shield of the fallen, but it will not last forever." The glowing barrier pulsed, holding back the hunters for a moment, but cracks already began to form. The soldiers struck again and again, each blow shaking the ground. The widows cried out as the barrier weakened. Jacob's chest burned with fear. His farm was torn apart, his land soaked in fire, but deeper than fear was his resolve. He would not let them take the widows, not while he still had breath. He raised his shovel once more, standing shoulder to shoulder with the widows. "Then I'll fight with you," Jacob said, his voice raw. "This is my home, and I won't let them take it." The widow's eyes glowed brighter, a silent bond forming in the firelit night. They were no longer strangers, no longer separate. They were a family, bound by survival. The barrier shook, cracks spreading like lightning. The hunters roared, charging again. Jacob gripped his shovel. The widows raised their glowing hands. The night exploded with fire and light, and as the storm of battle consumed the farm, one truth became clear. This fight was far from over. The shield cracked like thunder. Jacob flinched as shards of glowing light broke into the air, fading into nothing. The hunters roared with triumph, surging forward once more, their weapons blazing. The farm shook beneath the storm, fences collapsing, the barn catching fire at its edges, but Jacob did not fall back. His arms ached, his chest burned, but he stood shoulder to shoulder with the widows. 5 glowing figures against a tide of darkness. The tall widow's voice rang out above the chaos, strong and steady. "Stand, farmer. Stand with us till the end." The hunters struck. Beams of light tearing into the ground. Jacob swung his iron shovel, knocking a soldier to the dirt. Another lunged at him, but the second widow slashed her blade across the hunter's weapon, sparks flying. The youngest widow pulled Jacob back as fire erupted where he had just stood, her glowing hands pushing the flames aside. They were not fighting only with weapons. They were fighting with will. Every blow was defiance. Every cry was a vow that they would not be broken. Still, the hunters pressed harder. More ships circled above, their shadows swallowing the farm in black. Jacob's strength faltered, his shovel heavy in his hands. He looked at the burning fields, the animals fleeing, the land he had worked all his life turning to ash. Despair clawed at him. "This is hopeless," he whispered. The tall widow caught his arm, her silver eyes blazing. "Do not speak of hopelessness," she said, her voice fierce. "Our husbands died fighting, but we live. And as long as we live, we fight." Her words struck him like fire. Jacob gritted his teeth, raised his shovel once more. The widows pressed closer, their glowing marks flaring like stars. Together they pushed back. Then something changed. The glowing marks on the widow's arms began to burn brighter, brighter than ever before. Jacob shielded his eyes as the light spread across their skin, weaving into patterns that connected all 5 of them. The air shimmered. The ground trembled. The hunters paused, unease flashing in their eyes. "What are they doing?" one hissed. The leader snarled. "Destroy them before it's complete." The widows' voices rose in unison, a song of sorrow and defiance. Their words were alien, but Jacob felt them in his chest. It was not just sound, it was memory, grief and hope woven into one. Light burst from the widows, sweeping across the farm. It struck the hunters, their weapons sputtering, their armor cracking. The earth itself seemed to rise against them, the soil shifting, vines wrapping around their legs. The hunters stumbled, their formation breaking. Jacob stared in awe. The widows were not only survivors, they were carriers of something greater. Their husbands had left them not only sorrow, but power. And now that power flowed through them as one. The leader roared, charging forward, his weapon raised high. Jacob stepped in his path, raising his shovel with trembling arms. The hunter laughed cruelly. "You? A farmer?" But before the weapon could strike, the tall widow's hand flared with light. She drove it into the hunter's chest, the glow burning through his armor. With a final cry, he fell, his weapon clattering to the ground. The remaining hunters faltered. Their courage breaking, one by one, they stumbled back toward their ships. The widow's light surged again, blasting across the valley. The hunters retreated, their ships lifting into the sky. Within moments, the shadows were gone, swallowed by the horizon. Silence fell, the flames smoldered, the smoke rising into the dawn sky. Jacob dropped his shovel, falling to his knees, his body shaking from exhaustion. The widows sank beside him, their glowing marks dimming. They were bruised, burned, but alive. For a long time, none of them spoke. The farm lay broken, but it still stood. The widows had not only saved themselves, they had saved him too. At last, the tall widow placed a hand on Jacob's shoulder. Her touch was warm, her voice steady though soft. You chose to stand with us. You gave us more than shelter. You gave us a home. Jacob lifted his eyes to hers. I only wanted workers, he whispered, almost laughing through his exhaustion. But I got warriors instead. The widows smiled faintly. Their sorrow eased for the first time. The youngest widow whispered, No, farmer, you got family. Jacob looked around, at the broken fences, the scorched earth, the half-burned barn. The farm was wounded, but it was not gone. And now, it was no longer his alone, it belonged to all of them. He pushed himself to his feet, offering a hand to the widows. Then let's rebuild it together. They rose with him, their glowing marks faint but steady. The battle had taken much, but it had also given something new. A bond stronger than fear, a promise that the farm would not only survive, it would grow. As the sun climbed higher, Jacob looked at the widows and felt a strange certainty. He had sought hands to plow his fields. Instead, he had found hearts that would stand with him through fire. And though the hunters might return, though the world might still burn with war, this farm, this family, would endure. Jacob smiled faintly, his voice quiet but certain. They came to my farm as strangers, but now they will never leave as anything less than my own. And with that, the lonely farm in Green Valley became more than land and crops. It became a home,